in terms of what they came up with, I love that the design of the park really has Oak Cliff in mind. They realized that from Marsalis to Ewing, so the park's going to span the freeway between Marsalis and Ewing, right beside the zoo. There's a 20-foot elevation change, which is unique in Oak Cliff, that we have this topography and, tree cover. We're on an escarpment. Like if you go basically past the Trinity, is flat all the way to Oklahoma, but we have like the most pretty part of the city as well, right? And so they wanted to sort of reflect that in the design.
Welcome to the Hidden City Podcast. I'm Grant.
And I'm Doug, and we're here to share some of the incredible stories and people from Oak Cliff that you might not know.
We're going to sit down with some of the visionaries, craftsmen, and business owners who have shaped Oak Cliff into what it is today.
Oak Cliff is on the south bank of the Trinity River, a few miles south of downtown Dallas. While technically it was part of Dallas, it was its own city for a long time, and it still has that independent spirit.
We'll dive into the history and the spirit of this place, exploring the different challenges and successes that defined it.
This is The Hidden City, a podcast about the people and the stories that make Oak Cliff extraordinary.
Well, welcome to the Hidden City Podcast. On this episode, we're talking with April Allen, who is the president and CEO of the Southern Gateway Public Green Foundation. So just recently, Gail and Jim Halperin stepped up to make an astounding $23 million gift to the foundation and in support of Dallas' Southern Gateway Park. So that means the future deck park will be named Halperin Park, and it's set to open in 2026. We're really excited about this park and what it'll bring to Oak Cliff, and we talk about those things in today's episode. So let's go ahead and jump in with April Allen. Thanks for joining us, April.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you back in Wax Space for today, and it's good to catch up with you.
For sure.
Yeah. So, April, I think we first maybe met back in the Go Cliff days. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember how we first got connected, but tell me about your history in Oak Cliff, and did you grow up in this area? How did you come to Oak Cliff?
Yeah, no. I think it is 4 Oak Cliff days. No, not 4 Oak Cliff. Go Oak Cliff days. Sorry. Getting my Oak Cliffs mixed up.
All good.
Yeah,
anyway,
it was a board.
The board.
We were on the board for that.
Yeah.
That's like right when we
Andrew
first got
Snow.
involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Andrew was that. Andrew was our fearless.
the
He brought us all
fearless
leader at that point.
Fearless leader.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so my story, my Oak Cliff origin story is actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I moved here in 2004 out of graduate school, and I was moving to Dallas because I had a job, and I was looking to purchase a home at the time. So I was coming out of grad school, it was like late 20s, and I decided, I don't want to like rent anymore. I want to actually buy something. And so I started doing some research online, and I saw a D Magazine article about neighborhoods, and Winnetka Heights was featured, and I was like, oh, this like looks really cool. Yeah. It's like historic, and it would be close to downtown. My office was going to be right downtown, so we wouldn't have to get on the freeway and do the whole, commute, whatever. Anyway, so I was talking to the realtor that was assigned to me by the company, and I said, yeah, I really want to look in Oak Cliff. And she goes, oh, no, you don't want to do that. That's not the right demographic for you. And I said, oh, okay. And this is on the phone. So she clearly didn't know who she was talking to. So she goes, well, I said, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, it's not really legal for me to say this. And you're like,
oh,
please
Lord.
stop.
Red flag number one. But, it's just, we should get you a place in Uptown, a condo in Uptown. And of course I was like, I don't want a condo in Uptown. And so long story short, I got a new realtor, and I ended up with someone who lives over here, and she's still a realtor in the neighborhood.
Nice.
And all this happening on the phone and online. So, cause I was in Boston at the time. I moved here after graduate school at Harvard, and I ultimately found a house and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up in the Kings Highway neighborhood where I bought my home.
Okay.
And that was in 2004. But the funny thing is, so that was my first like, oh, okay, welcome to Texas / Dallas.
Warning signs about Oak Cliff.
Yeah, warning signs about that realtor. I was like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And then I got here, bought the house, looked at my closing documents, and on the deed of my house is it very clearly says not to be sold to Negroes. on the deed. And there's a stamp over it that says, no longer valid as of like the 1960 something Fair Housing Act, blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting because I think about that in the role that I have now, in that, what we're trying to do with the park is multiple things. We call it a park with a purpose because it has, there's multiple goals and motivations. But one of them is to really address the divide that came when the freeway was built. And, the freeway was built along the lines of redlining maps.
Right. Yeah.
And so, that's when we talk about like systemic injustice, that's a system that like our leaders created,
established,
that really divided our communities and continues to have effects to this day. And that stamp on my deed is there because of redlining. Because the neighborhood I live in now was not a neighborhood where people like me were supposed to be living or buying or owning. So I think, it's 20 years since I moved here. I had my 20-year anniversary this June.
Congrats. That's awesome. That's fun.
And so, I love that I'm doing something that has this purpose. It really does feel very purpose-driven for me to be in this role at this time. And I can look back over my life and my career and see how, all the different things I've done sort of lead me to this place and allow me to really, bring all those experiences and skills to bear. But anyway, that was a long way of telling you that's how I ended up in Oak Cliff. And I was thrilled to, move into the neighborhood and get to know my neighbors. And that's what I really fell in love. Even though I was traveling a lot with my job at the time, it was very local. Very like, I remember when I moved in, the guys that lived catty corner from my house, owned a floral design business. So they brought like a bouquet of flowers over. And then my next door neighbor was like, can we cut the grass for you? Because I know you probably don't have time to deal with that. And they were probably also like, this grass needs to be cut. But, it was just very local. And I loved that. And of course, I, got to know all my neighbors over the years and everything. And I always say, it's just because of it being a historic neighborhood, it really was, I think, built for, the pedestrian.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of our suburbs in Dallas, you can pull into your garage and you go into your house and you really never see your neighbors, whether, or pull into the back of the house, whereas our neighborhood is very much, you're forced to interact with your neighbors because you get out of your car. Most people don't have garages or if they do, they're separate. They're not attached to the house. Yeah. So anyway, I think that all is a part of like the structure that makes it such a great place to be and live and work and get to know folks. And so that's all worked well for me.
That's amazing, but also like horrible hearing some of that too.
I share it because I do think it's important for us to know, like, like redlining was this like thing that happened all those years ago.
Right.
And people sort of feel like, it's way back in the history books.
So you're like, I bought a home that had this on my deed. Yeah. Oh, well, and I want, that's one of the super beautiful things about the deck park is that kind of ability to connect those neighborhoods. And I know we want to get into that moment too a little bit, but I think even before that, contextually, I'm asking some questions about the deck park. Was Dallas the first one to do this, or are there other cities that have done a deck park? And then also, this will be our second one in the city. Mm-hmm. Maybe what is a deck park?
And then also, like, what exactly does this mean?
It does feel innovative in when it comes to city planning and design. But I think maybe laying some of that groundwork and then also sharing. We'll jump into that part of like healing neighborhoods too, with that ability to connect again.
So Dallas is definitely not the first to have a deck park. I mean, I think of even in Boston where I came from, where I lived, they had the big dig and then they built a big green space that I think it's the Rose Kennedy Greenway on top of it that's massive.
Wow.
So there are definitely other cities. Montreal has one that kind of goes over the interstate through the city. But I would say in the sense that we have what's a very actively managed park, it's programmed, there's activities going on. I think that's probably somewhat unique. I mean, I was in Phoenix last summer, and they also have one, sort of in the center of their city. Awesome. But it's not actively managed and programmed in the way that ours has sort of become, the Bryant Park of Dallas, And so I think that model, and actually I know that the folks at Clyde Warren learned a lot from the Bryant Park model, is somewhat unique. So what is a deck park? It's, really building a cap. They call it a cap over the interstate. We live in a city that has these interstates that are I guess subterranean. I don't know what you would call it, but like kind of
go under the ground.
Yeah, they're kind of underground versus like elevated freeways in other parts of the country. And so, in the case of Clyde Warren, they were able to sort of cap the freeway, build this bridge across it, and then build the park on top of it. I think our project came about because really neighbors, going back to this idea of neighbors. Had an opportunity to provide input when TxDOT was doing their community outreach work around the freeway construction. So and that's a whole nother story, the freeway and just how long it has taken to get like a half decent freeway in Southern Dallas. Yeah. Right. But, and all those connections that like go from 30 to 35 South, like that didn't exist in the past, You had to get off the freeway, drive through industrial and then get back on. So that stuff has happened in, the last little bit here. But so when TxDOT was doing the community outreach for the freeway work, that's where a couple of neighbors, and I think it's really interesting, an older woman from Kessler Park and a younger guy on the east side who was like at UNT Dallas at the time. They sort of worked together and like, hey, what while you're here, TxDOT, could we get an amenity kind of like what you built up north? And that was really sort of the getting the ball rolling on this and shopping it around to neighborhood associations, local officials, et cetera. But anyway, so it isn't unique, but I think what is unique about our project is the investment that's being made in the neighborhood that surrounds it. What of this sort of historically underinvested, really, part of the city. And so that's, I think, a model for other cities across the country. We've all benefited from a focus on this by the Department of Transportation and the infrastructure bill that was passed, the bipartisan infrastructure bill as part of the Biden administration, has a lot of funding for projects like this. How do we, address the wrongs of yesteryear by, thinking through like alternative approaches to addressing these divides that were created by freeways and railways and so anyway. So I think there's a lot of like thought going behind it right now across the country and other cities thinking about it. But in terms of like being as far along as we are under construction in a neighborhood like ours and really using it as a catalyst for something else. Like I think in the case of Clyde Warren, you already had like the Crescent down the street and, and it was more about like how do we connect these two neighborhoods.
Create a pass through.
So like downtown and uptown. And obviously that area has like mushroomed in growth around it.
Definitely.
But so this is really like how do we catalyze that? And then I think that's the exciting part about it too.
That is an exciting part. It seems like it's neighborhood driven, like you said. Neighbors are actively kind of giving feedback. Like you mentioned, the federal government part of there. It seems like there's so many interesting stakeholders in a project like this. I think we saw was it Mayor Pete Buttigieg was down here. I saw a picture one day.
$80 million or something. I was like, that's wild.
Mayor Pete's here.
Yes, I know.
We want to hear about that.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
what was that
super
like?
Exciting. So you're right. I mean, I would say, I know you wanted to talk about leadership challenges, but I think one of the leadership challenges is managing and all these various and disparate stakeholders because you do have, I mean, every level of government involved: federal, state, local, city, county. Then we have and kind of quasi-governmental organizations like the transportation orgs that we work with, and then of course everyone at the community level. Then we've got the business community, we've got philanthropy. So there's a lot of different folks involved. But in terms of Secretary Pete's visit, which we were excited to host him, so that was the bill I was talking about, the bipartisan infrastructure law, has a program called the Reconnecting Communities program. And so literally, I'm like, we're the poster child for this program.
This could not be more
perfect.
perfect.
I do want to, honor the memory of Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, who played a big role in authoring that part of the legislation, the Reconnecting Communities program. And so then, our project is in that district. And so I know that Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is, continuing to lead that charge, but she really was the one who sort of initiated the work around that program in the infrastructure bill, which was a multi-billion-dollar bill. And so now there's like several $billion that have been set aside for programs like this, where we address the infrastructure that has been dividing communities. How do we sort of address that now? So, so we were lucky to be a part. It was actually kind of a regional application that the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which is a long thing to say, but basically the COG is what we call it. They're sort of the what would you call it? Like the bank account for federal transportation dollars in the region, in the DFW region. And they submitted submitted a grant for our project. Clyde Warren has an extension that they're working on.
Cool.
There's one in McKinney that is actually under a bridge that they're working on.
Wow.
And then also a new deck park over 30, kind of in the farmers market area, going over to like Old City Hall, that kind of area. Huh. So the $80 million. Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
So that one, that $80 million grant didn't all come to us. We got 25 of it, which is awesome. Yeah. And actually what that does is help fund the bridge, the deck for the second part of the park.
Good.
So, right now, so when it's done, the park will be basically the same size as Clyde Warren, a little over 5 acres.
Wow.
But what we're working on right now is a little over half of that, so about 3 acres.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have to come back and get like funding for the rest of it. Yeah. Well, now with the federal dollars, and then we got some state money thanks to Senator West and others, and we got some city money thanks to all the folks who voted in the bonds.
Yeah.
And then some from the COG I was talking about before.
Yeah.
We're able to actually we have the funding to build the bridge for the second phase.
That's amazing.
So, so they're going to start
awesome.
doing design work on it and all this kind of stuff and kind of getting ready, but that'll start kind of kicking off here in the next couple years too. So that's exciting.
Okay. So it's already in motion now.
So that's in motion. That's
amazing.
done. So we're excited about that. So what's happening out there right now though is that first phase, the first half of the park, is what's under construction. So we should have that. We started construction early this year, and it'll take about 2 years. So we'll be open in time for World Cup 2026, which I'm excited about.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
Good timing, too.
Yeah, very good timing. I know. So trying to think about how we can really tap in and to all of those activities and festivities, too, because I think it'll be great. But yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, it's so fun to drive by it and
see
start to see a new thing here or there.
Totally.
And you're like, oh, this is happening. This is fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that is one of the challenges that we had initially, because I do think, a lot of these kind of big projects are announced and then it's like, oh, whatever happened to X or whatever happened to Y. And so I spent a lot of my time initially, really building confidence that actually this is going to happen. Now, obviously, now that it's under construction, it feels a little bit more real.
People see
and
it
tangible.
and
But it's hard, particularly in Southern Dallas, to get folks on board, certainly raising funds. I mean, we're raising, millions of dollars for this.
So much money for this.
And I think, we don't necessarily have the same access to the name brandy VIP people that are on other, there's lots of great projects happening in Dallas right now.
Yeah.
But we don't, our board is actually very much a community-based board. So, so I think that was one of the challenges for us initially was no, this is really legit happening. So
I think so many neighbors are so excited about it. I know as we're driving by, you see it starting to grow and build.
Take shape.
And so, that's exciting. But talking about that there's challenges of being in Southern Dallas. And I guess historically there's been, it's a complex neighborhood, Oak Cliff, with some absolute horrific things that have happened, with even this redlining that you've talked about with freeways. And how does this project that you're working on start to heal some of that? And how can Oak Cliff be proud of that movement happening in that way?
Well, I like to say that one of the goals of our project, I said it's a park with a purpose, and and that means that it's not just about the green space, which is important. We don't have a lot of public spaces that we can come to. It is about catalyzing economic development, but it's also really about how we lift up the people in the neighborhoods that live around it and in the larger, greater Oak Cliff area. And ultimately, I think it's about telling people they matter. I think about if a realtor is telling me, oh no, you don't want to live in Oak Cliff. Like, what is that like subtle messaging that you're giving to people who live here, or kids who are like going to school here? Yeah. And I think the fact that we can make such a historic investment, it's several $100 million in this project, is hopefully, just a small way of saying, like, to the folks who live here, you matter too. It's not just always about, things in other parts of the city. So I hope that that's a part of the way we can heal the divide. Obviously, tangibly, once the park actually opens, and we, I hope that we start to see the ripple effect in the neighborhoods surrounding it that, benefit the neighbors. So, I know, we have to be mindful about how that impacts the neighbors. But if we can do it right, we can do it in a way where they actually are benefiting, and then also, again, have this amazing amenity that they can come to and enjoy with their families and friends and stuff. So, and that we can also use to kind of honor the history of Oak Cliff. And, that we have a really interesting, we call it cultural confluence here in that, the history of the historic African-American communities, the Latino community that came later, the, Anglo community that was here way back when. And so I think there's a way that we can leverage the park to really tell that story.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that is one of the things I do love about Oak Cliff. It's this mixed culture,
a very
and
diverse.
There's so much history to all of those different groups of people. I mean, it's just it's a cool.
I feel like it's the most interesting part of Dallas, honestly.
I couldn't agree more.
Let's go, April. Let's go.
Seriously, because we have the history of the colony and all the settlers and
French utopian society that just shows up. They're like, this is it. This is where we're doing it.
Yeah, and then they sort of fail at it, and then they have to figure out what else can we do?
Yeah,
and then I mean, a lot of kind of people in Dallas is sort of name brandy history. Were raised in Oak Cliff. If you haven't been, it's kind of interesting to walk around the Oak Cliff Cemetery, which is over there on 8th Street across from Townview. There's a lot of names that are on freeways and stuff around here and streets that are in the cemetery.
There's even there's an episode we need to do at some point of the designers of some of Oak Cliff early on. What was it? They were Highland Park.
Totally. A lot of the and the homes are built in the same way that by those same architects.
I know.
Absolutely. 100%. So and not just in North Oak Cliff, but my husband's family is from Glen Oaks, which is a beautiful neighborhood. And it was all custom homes, each one of those homes was custom built, and it was the same builders that built neighborhoods in East Dallas. So you'll see some of the same types of homes in those neighborhoods as you will here. And of course, when the schools desegregated, there was white flight and all that changed.
Right.
But I think, I going back to our original premise here, I do think that, Dallas is a fairly new city. So most of the other parts of it feel kind of new, and I love that we have this history that we can honor here. And like I said, we have these waves of new people coming to the area. And I hope that we can, use the park to really reflect that. And we heard that loud and clear when we did our community outreach, that we want something that feels distinctly Oak Cliff. And I think that's what's going to make our park successful, is that it is giving you a unique experience.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're listening to a lot of the community's feedback too, and I imagine that helps shape the whole project.
100%, and obviously it helps that I live here. And
you've been here 20 years.
You're a neighbor.
I'm a neighbor, and I actually
kind of know what's going on.
Share a lot of the same sentiments as community members, and it's a very personal project for me. So,
was there anything in that process of kind of gathering feedback from people that was surprising, or was there anything that you heard that was a ton of people said this, that maybe helped the way you think about the project as a whole? Or
I think a couple of things. And this kind of goes back to our previous discussion about the diversity of folks here. We had a wide range of people participate in in our outreach efforts, and it was the seniors were don't forget about us, we want to come to the park and think about how we can be a part of it. We've had this idea for doing kind of a ambassador program, like kind of like they do at DFW.
Yeah.
You know, they've got those ambassadors at the airport. And so like, could we do that with our senior community? It's because sometimes I think a lot, like people think about parks and it's like, oh, you know, the playground and like green space and concerts.
Right.
But I mean, you know, we can be more intentional about like the range of folks who are going to visit the park. You know, we heard from the school community that it can be difficult to like get dropped off at the park, like bring kids there on school buses. So that was a part of the reason that our design team incorporated a turnaround for the food truck lane, but also for like seniors to get dropped off and like school buses and things. So we try to be very responsive. I think I'm trying to think of anything else that was like a I don't know, just kind of caught me off guard.
Well, even the storyline of you know, TxDOT kind of having a plan and then the community saying like, hey, what about maybe some of this, you know, deck park idea, or like, are there some other ways we could think about this? And that seemed to like snowball into this whole project in some ways.
It did. I think, and I have to give credit to Michael Morris, who's the who heads the North Central Texas Council of Governments, that quasi-governmental organization I was talking about. I do think that he very much has been thinking about like, how do we address some of these historical inequities, and you know, to the extent that he can within his range of influence, you know, help to address that. I think he's been very thoughtful about that. So that's why, you know, the investment in our project and others like it. You were saying something about
just like the sort of
people that ran with it. I was going to say something about
the
that.
storyline of the older woman, I think it was, and the younger man who kind of
was
met.
that Paul, by the way?
Yeah, Catherine. So it's Paul Carden on the east side, and then Catherine Homan, who's this woman who, you know, very active, in the, you know, neighborhood, and so she's been here a long time, and they really both kind of ran with it and took it to, you know, it was Scott Griggs was the councilperson at the time on the west side. Dwayne Caraway was the councilperson on the east side at one point. Then it went to Miss Arnold. So, you know, they really ran with it kind of got the ball rolling. And I mean, as some people say, you know, we learn in Oak Cliff, like a closed mouth doesn't get fed. You know, you've got to like advocate for what you want. And so I think we do have like a culture of that advocacy here. And I think that's like what a big part of like the fabric of the neighborhood. Like it's very entrepreneurial, you know? And as you guys know.
We've talked about this on the show even quite a bit, where it's just, there's this nature. when you were talking about Kings Highway, and it's like, oh, this couple ran this floral shop. And I'm like, oh, of course, it's in this DNA of this neighborhood.
Totally,
you know?
Totally. Because, you know, I think over time, like you couldn't depend on necessarily, I don't know, the powers that be, so to speak, you know, helping you. So you just sort of make things happen on your own. I love that.
Yeah.
And even the design of the city, how you're like, it's pedestrian forward, or it's like we have these older buildings that are in places like Bishop Arts or downtown Elmwood or wherever that are these business centers. And so you see these opportunities and people are attracted to this and start to build that in those areas. So I had a question on the deck park. What are some things, as people are listening to this or watching this episode, that they could maybe visualize? Like what can they expect there? And I know the design's kind of maybe, I would assume, ever evolving to an extent too, but
I know, and that's what I was going to share. It was another interesting part. So because when the deck park was kind of coming together initially, they actually used the same design team that designed Clyde Warren to kind of come up with a conceptual plan for it. But then our board said, you know, we really want to have a more community-informed design. And so we scrapped that and got a new design team. We went out to an RFP and ended up with a team that was led by people who've actually like raised their families in Oak Cliff, from Oak Cliff, and had that ethos. So I think that was really great. But in terms of what they came up with, I love that the design of the park, and you know, you can go to our website and check out the renderings, really has Oak Cliff in mind. So they realized that from Marsalis to Ewing, so the park's going to span the freeway between Marsalis and Ewing, right beside the zoo. There's a 20-foot elevation change, which is unique in Oak Cliff, that we have this topography and, you know, tree cover on an escarpment. Like if you go basically past the Trinity is flat all the way to Oklahoma, but we have like the most pretty part of the city as well, right? And so they wanted to sort of reflect that in the design. So we end up with this 20-foot space in the middle of the park that is creates a kind of high-low, multi-level experience in the park.
That's cool.
So it's not just a flat park. And so that middle space is what houses our food and beverage building. So it's kind of tucked in under the lawn of the second phase. It's kind of interesting. You'll have to take a look at the renderings. Cool. But, we have a large children's area. It'll have a very kind of natural feel. So the whole park has a lot of wood elements. The children's area is going to be nature-based play. Our landscape designer that kind of designed that area talked a lot about raising his kids in Oak Cliff, and now they used to play in the creeks and streams. We have a lot of like tributaries to the Trinity that kind of roll through here. So that's kind of echoed in some of the design of the playground, and then the play structures are all going to be wood-based, so like tree forts and things like that. So it'll be really fun and unique and different. There's a landing so there's a ramp that goes from the kids area up to this landing. In the future, hopefully we'll have a bridge that goes across the access road to the zoo. But for now, you have this high point that gives you beautiful views to downtown. It's right beside a kind of amphitheater. There's a rainwater, like kind of curtain water feature that comes down into the kids area.
April, this is sounding amazing.
Cool. It's really cool. There's a stage area. You can do like obviously concerts, and we'd love to partner with the zoo when they do zoo lights and think about like what we could be doing there.
That seems like that'll be a fun
we can also
partnership.
have a skating rink there. I mean,
Let's
there's all
Chad.
kinds of opportunities.
So it sounds like the park has some amazing children's area, which I personally am excited about with kids of 3. But natural elements of like water and amphitheater. What else can we expect from the neighborhood being involved in some of this stuff too? You said food trucks. And,
so we'll have a food truck lane, and then also instead of having one big restaurant, our hope is to have kind of multiple options in the food and beverage building, and so that's where we're hoping to bring in local folks who can really give a bit more of a flavor of Oak Cliff, right? Like when people come to the park, whether they be like regional visitors or local, we want them to really feel like they've got a sense of Oak Cliff. So that's where we're hoping that we can have kind of a mix of smaller, like makers and mixed in with, some others. As we look, it's important for us to continue to drive revenue to keep the doors open on the park. Yeah. But we also want to be a place where we can like maybe help someone who probably not startup, but is maybe smaller scale, and this would really give them an opportunity to be exposed to the 2 million visitors. That's what they're expecting, 2 million visitors that will come to the park annually, and I think that would be a huge step up for them. And also, we hope that we can be a place where we like support and undergird folks like that. So in partnership with maybe some of our bank partners, is there some, I don't know.
Your local co-working space.
Yeah, that too. I mean, just how do we help support, those small business owners to help grow their business.
That sounds like that could be a fun thing to figure out. It's like, how do you plug in all the unique businesses and people that are in Oak Cliff to this and give it its own personal touch.
Give it its own personality. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, anyway, that's one of the big ways we're thinking about it.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I haven't talked about it yet, but we did spend about a year doing a ton of outreach and focus groups and surveys around this equitable development plan. And it has 6 pillars. One of them is, and this is how do we like be really specific and intentional about ensuring the park benefits the people that live around it.
Right.
And so economic development is one of the pillars, and that's kind of where not only have we been very thoughtful about, even in this construction phase, how do we hire people who look like the neighborhood that we're in. We actually have people working on the project that live in the vicinity of the neighborhood. And then, once we open, how do we bring in not just vendors for food and beverage, but like even some of the services we'll need, are there small businesses that can kind of play a part there as well? So
I love that that's baked into the intentionality behind the whole project.
Exactly.
It's such an interesting, the economics of a deck park seems so interesting.
I know.
Because there's so many.
It's interesting.
Maybe that's like a generous way to say it.
It's definitely interesting. And we'll have to figure it out because, it is on us it's a public-private project, which means it technically lives under the city, but it's run and managed and operated by our foundation.
I see.
And so that's the same way the zoo operates and the Arboretum and others. But, we're not going to have a ticket. We're not selling tickets because it's a public space. So we got to be very thoughtful about how we like keep it sustained and make it sustainable from a financial and economic perspective.
Right.
And so the food and beverage side of it is a big part of it. But, we're trying to think, we own a small piece of land like adjacent. So we're like thinking about like how could we maybe use that to drive revenue, events, whatever. So we're trying to be very thoughtful about like what that looks like. And another part of it that I didn't mention, I think is kind of cool, again, in a way to sort of honor Oak Cliff, is we have this pedestrian thoroughfare that kind of goes through the park, and it actually runs right into 12th Street, which was divided when the freeway was built, bifurcated when the freeway was built. And we're going to turn that into kind of an Oak Cliff Walk of Fame, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, where we like try to identify people who contributed to Oak Cliff's history and honor them. We'll come up with a better way to say that. But and in partnership with our community advisory council, we've been kind of doing some work on that. And then we want to come back out to the community as we get closer to the park to sort of help identify like who are those folks, organizations that we would want to honor. And so, because there's a lot of like neat history, 10th Street Historic District is down the road.
Right.
And that was like its own thing. So we want to be very thoughtful about all of that.
Yeah.
Tell us about 10th Street. I feel like that's something that you hear a lot, but
and you should talk to Taylor about that too, because he's very connected to 10th Street.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was one of the original freedmen's towns in Dallas. It's on the east side of the freeway. Like a self-sustaining town for African Americans, or self-sustaining neighborhood, I should say, for African Americans, and over the years, as the same has happened in a lot of parts of the city, you've had, flight to the suburbs and, underinvestment, and just, it has in some ways fallen on tough times, but we're hopeful that, we can support their efforts. There are folks in the community that are looking at ways that they can kind of, revitalize and really tell the story of 10th Street, and we'd love to partner with them on that once we kind of can figure out where that would fit at the park. I think that would be a great way to help tell their story as well.
I love it. I'm a history. I like the history side of all this a lot too. So I love that that's being brought forward too with the project. It's like, hey, we're not gonna
this isn't just a copy and paste part.
We're gonna tell the story of this.
And I mean, just cool. The rich story of Oak Cliff. There's so much. There's so interesting history there.
Yeah,
we're lucky to have you doing this project. This is awesome.
I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about this project, do you ever imagine you'd be working on a deck park project like this?
No, I don't. I mean, so I was originally on the board of this nonprofit, the foundation, and then in 2020. Kind of like post-pandemic, it was sort of like, oh, okay, like we really need someone to kind of drive the bus and make sure this is moving, because we're getting to the point where okay, this is happening. Like TxDOT was about to build the deck, and so they asked me to kind of step into this role. So it's been fun, and it's it's just fun to my office is around the corner from my house, and I get to kind of live, work, and play in the neighborhood, which is what I think ultimately, I know we're going to get there. The hope is, for the ripple effect of this project is like, I think that, it's so close to downtown. There's huge opportunity to kind of leverage the momentum that's happening in Bishop Arts as it kind of slowly makes its way to the freeway, also over to the neighborhoods on the east side. So, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there.
You mean big picture?
Big picture
for Oak Cliff as our neighborhood, as it's continuing to see the spotlight, and like really the Southern Gateway Deck Park being one of those big spotlight moments too. Right. It's growing more and more, even over East Oak Cliff kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. Like we had an interesting brainstorming session last week, and there's a creek that runs on the east side. Cedar Creek runs on the east side right there. And the folks we were talking to, like, what if you could, wouldn't it be cool to have, homes, neighborhoods, something that, kind of almost creating, another green belt over there, around that park that would connect to the trail that goes up there by the Santa Fe Trestle. And so, I think we can we're in a space where we can dream a little bit, which is fun. But I do think that... it's the kind of, what's the word? linchpin is not the right word, but
It's a building block.
Yeah,
or
building
something,
block. Exactly.
Because Bishop Arts is such a. People are like, oh, they don't know what Oak Cliff is sometimes, but they always know what Bishop Arts is. And so you're like, okay.
Right.
But this is like, hey, great, let's use that as a building block for other parts in the neighborhood.
And I think, spotlight. Like I've been here 20 years, so I've sort of seen how Bishop Arts went from like a couple of restaurants to, what it is now. And I think, yes, it does change the fabric of the neighborhood, and it is not exactly the way it was 20 years ago. But we continue to have more and more people moving to the DFW region, and we shouldn't be ceding all the growth to all of our friends in the suburbs. Like, why should I love Frisco, but like, why should they have all the cool stuff in Frisco?
Well, let's talk more about this.
I know. No, it's
true.
So like, for one of the ideas I have is, wouldn't it be cool to have another attraction in the vicinity of the park? Like, so we have the zoo, we have the park. Like, what else could we attract? Like, Universal Studios is building something up in Frisco, and I'm like, I'm not saying it needs to be Universal Studios, but like, what else is there that would be kind of complimentary, or that you start to create like a real destination, and it's not a place. This is something I'm getting from my friends at the zoo. Not a place that you drive through, but that you drive to. And I think we have an opportunity to do that with what we're doing here, and there is so much like untapped opportunity. We have to do it in a way that's mindful of how we impact the people that live in that area.
Absolutely.
And we're working hard to do that. But I do think it's a great way that we can grow our city to benefit all of us. There's so much made of like the DFW region being like on fire, blah blah blah.
Right.
But like city of Dallas is not
so much.
Not so much.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of flat to declining a little bit.
Right.
So, we have to be like, what are the untapped opportunities we have? And Southern Dallas is that untapped opportunity. And, to the extent that we can grow it, but in a sort of like, I know Monty says gentrification, but in a way that is really mindful of how it impacts neighbors. I think we can do that. So
I mean, there's I'll say this real quick, and then Doug, you should jump in. But there's the actual just practical. You can only go so far north,
right? Exactly.
Before you're in Oklahoma.
I mean, hello.
And like, we're talking about 10 minutes south. Like, we're not talking about 30 minutes south. We're talking about just 10 minutes south of downtown.
It's like 10
and so there is this like,
here is 10 minutes south.
Oak Cliff. Like you can see downtown. You don't have to continue
of downtown.
Suburbs more and more north.
Totally. No, I mean the park is literally like less than 2 miles from downtown.
It's so close. It's insane when you think about that. You hop on the freeway and you're
right there.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason that you shouldn't be finding, building and growing that area is what I'm saying. Yeah,
I agree.
Big picture thinking, kind of how you're talking about, there are so many people moving to Dallas. I mean, I think about that episode of Freakonomics that was like, why is everyone moving to Dallas? He did 2 parts, which was great, because it was like, hey, there's actually all these cities that are kind of growing as suburbs around the area, but Dallas itself maybe isn't seen that so much. So I love that you're thinking that way about Oak Cliff, because Oak Cliff, I'm so curious how other people see it, or from other cities sometimes too, when they're like, oh, maybe it's just Bishop Arts, or maybe it's just the zoo. But like, you're thinking of it in a way of bringing people here, and having an asset or a something that neighbors can enjoy and love, that people want to come to. And so
100%.
That's just exciting thinking about it in such a big picture kind of way.
And it's like, I think that it's, the use of green space is kind of an interesting thing too, right? Like, you don't think that green space would be
so attractive,
a driver of all these things that we're talking about, but it really can be, because like, who doesn't want to live by a park, or look over a park, or be able to be in walking distance to a park? Visit Dallas has these metrics about like what drives people to come to cities. And I think it's TripAdvisor has all this data about like what people search for, and green space is like the number one thing they search for when they go to a new city, and like by far and away above every like restaurants, whatever, attractions. So like, it really is kind of an interesting driver of many of the other things
of destinations. Well, I even know mutual
neighborhoods,
friend,
destinations, all of it.
A mutual friend of sorts, but the Philip and Barry. They've told Grant and I just how much of an economic driver this thing is too, and so it's a destination, something that's like attractive for the neighborhood, but it's like also it has real impact for these surrounding businesses and people. So,
exactly. So
we've talked history. Let's talk and we're talking a little bit of future, but like, April, when you think about the future of this, what do you hope it'll look like 5, 10, 20 years from now as the project reaches its second stage completion, people use it, there's vendors in there. Can you paint the picture for us a little bit of what you hope to see, 10, 20 years down the road from now?
Well, I'm hopeful that it'll be, the projections were 2 million visitors. I hope we double that, in 10 years. I think, I hope that it becomes a real live, work, play destination. Like, I think ultimately what we're building is a new district for Dallas. When I first moved here, West Village was like almost an island right there. Like, there was all that's there now was not there. Like, you would go to West Village, eat whatever, and then leave. And now, like, so much mushroomed up around it. And I'm not saying we want it to look like that, so don't mistake that at all.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, I think that just having more people, that cut across socioeconomic, cultural, all of the things, and again reflect the neighborhood that we love in Oak Cliff, I think would be amazing. And I'm hopeful that this is just kind of the start of that.
Exciting. Well, I'm pumped about it. I can't wait to be at the 2026 World Cup watch party at the deck park. So we'll see you there hopefully.
Yes, from your lips to Adidas's ears.
Yeah, there we go. Work that. Adidas.
I know.
That's too funny.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hidden City. We hope you discovered something about Oak Cliff that you didn't know. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you subscribe to it on YouTube and then follow us on any of the podcasting platforms. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend, and thanks so much for tuning in.